Okay. I appreciate you checking out the channel and I thank you for tuning in. So before I go to a breakdown as to why James Gunn threw in the towel for a Superman film after 34 days, I want Mr. Terrence Stamp. Okay. We lost another acting legend and another great. He was the original General Zod, and he was in much other films such as Wall Street and The Limey, just to name a few. So I'm just gonna take this moment to pay some respect for him. So I'm just gonna actually take a moment of silence. Rest in peace, Mr. Stamp, and we thank you for your contributions. Okay. So as we already know, James Gunn is already through in the towel, but for some reason, there seem to be some people who seem to doubt or try to pretend that for some reason that this movie is being labeled as a success, whether it be his fans, his critics, or his supporters, or just media outlets, just to name a few. They keep labeling this movie as for a success for some reason because there happens to be a distinction between a flop and a bomb, and since it didn't bomb when it first came out, it does not take away from the fact that it's not a success because it does translate into a flop. Okay, so I wanted to make this video just to illustrate as to why this movie is not a success by any stretch of the imagination whatsoever. So James Gunn's Superman is already out on digital release after 34 days of being in the theaters, right? So James Gunn said that the main reason why this movie is coming to digital so early is because he wanted people to get the opportunity to see the movie that couldn't make it to theaters for some reason. Um, and he forgot that his own movie series, his own series, Peacemaker season 2, is going to debut in August and not September. But the truth is that the powers that be, David Zaslav, was the reason why he ordered the movie to be released on digital because Gun Superman has gone as far as it can go, and nothing can be changed about that. Okay, it costs Warner Brothers more money to keep it in theaters, especially if there's no real momentum and there's no substantial movement to keep it in theaters, right? So they believe that the move to digital will actually help them as far as getting additional money for it, right? So the move to digital is it's not really gonna help them get any additional money, especially since a lot of people who already saw it either liked it or loved it or they didn't like it at all or they were meh, where they already saw it 2 or 3 times and didn't have a need to see it again. So most people in general don't have a desire to see it again, and there's little money to be left to be made on the digital and physical copies of this. So nobody's really interested in owning a piece of this. Okay, but gun fans and critics are actually upset with him because he decided to pull the movie from theaters to digital. Hundreds, not thousands, hundreds of his fans just can't grasp the idea that it's not really up to Gunn, and there's no point in keeping it in theaters because it's costing them more money to keep it in circulation when less people are not showing up for it. And it's at this point that it's very clear who the winner is. Man of Steel. Okay, this game is over. 12 years later, James Gunn had even if they made it after 600 million, it still won't catch up to Man of Steel. Okay, and it won't catch up to him in any way. It still won't make the real money that it made for just excuse me for adjustment for inflation, which is over $900 million. And you're not gonna get that. You won't even get to $670 million. Okay, this is over. However, people want to keep playing this game like we still have to go and keep proving it. Okay, well, let's do that. As you can see, Man of Steel, a movie that was released 12 years ago, made over $660 million. Okay, and that doesn't include adjusted for inflation, which would really mean it'd be over $900 million today. Okay, so while Gunn's Superman sits at a little over 600 million of today. Okay, so it's not really going to catch up to it because that means that it would take a lot more time to do it, and this is going to cost them more money because I've seen theaters pull the movie out of theaters because there's no point because nobody's showing up for it. Okay, and then I realized that some Gun fans and critics have really tried to reach hard for wins by saying Gunn's Superman made more than Batman versus Superman: Dawn of Justice. but I don't really consider it a solo Superman movie. But let's do it. Even when you see the number of tickets that Batman versus Superman: Dawn of Justice sold, it sold 159 tickets worldwide, where Gunn Superman only sold 67 million tickets, and they lost a significant portion of the Snyderverse audience, which is what I'll cover in detail later on. Okay, so as you can see, Batman versus Superman: Dawn of Justice made over $330 million domestically, over $870 million worldwide. Okay, that is 12 years ago. Both don't include adjustment for inflation, which means it made over $1 billion. That's just the cut studio interference version of the film when it was originally released. But let's do this. Let's line up ensemble film, a straight ensemble film against another ensemble film. Except in this case, this is David Ayer's 2016 Suicide Squad, the cut studio interference version of the film, against James Gunn's 2021 The Suicide Squad film. Okay? Ayer's Suicide Squad movie that made over $320 million domestically and over $740 million domestically, that made over $740 million worldwide, which both don't include adjustment for inflation, which will be priced at over $940 million today. Gunn's The Suicide Squad only made $55 million domestically and $168 million worldwide. So whether it's Snyder versus Gunn or Ayer versus Gunn, Snyder and Ayer win overall. And understand, Suicide Squad, that is also the cut version of the film, right? That was the one that they tried to make into a comedy. And that's the one that we're asking for when we say release the Ayer cut. So Ayer wins and Snyder wins, okay? So you lose on that account. Another thing to take into account, Gunn Superman didn't even beat Bryan Singer's 2006's Superman Returns with Brandon Routh either. And when in Superman Returns brought in over $675 million, and when you include in just before inflation, that's how much it came up to. So when Gunn fans and critics keep scrambling for wins and excuses to compete for a film that was released 12 years ago, just understand it couldn't even beat a Superman film that was beat that you couldn't even beat a Superman film that was released 18 years ago. So among Superman movies as a whole, it didn't resonate with the audiences enough for people to fully support it. Okay? And as you can tell, Man of Steel sold over 82 million tickets, right? Gun Superman tickets, Gun Superman only sold 35 million tickets, 35 or more million tickets so far. 12 years ago, more people spent less for tickets, and more people showed up at the movie theaters and supported Man of Steel, where today less people are going to the movie theaters. This accounts for why the box office number for Gun Superman is high, but also lacks the momentum of fewer tickets were sold. They're just not showing up for this movie. Okay? And I noticed that Gun fans and critics keep saying that it had the highest domestic box office than any other Superman film, right? Again, which is not true. On this graph, as you can see, Man of Steel made $128 million 12 years ago. That's not accounting. That's not taking into account adjustment for inflation, which would price it at $177 million today. Okay, where Gunn's Superman film only made $123 million. So there's no win there either. And on top of that, Gunn's movie needed to make at least 850 to $900 million to break even, right? Because of what they spent on the budgeting and marketing to sell it to his fans, the regular audience goers, and the skeptics. Also, this film was supposed to be their flagship film to bring in everybody to build their DCEU, to prove why there was a good reason why they got rid of the whole main and supporting cast of the Snyderverse. Because otherwise, it would be considered a massive failure and would be a huge flop as we speak, which means you've wasted everybody's time. And the fact is, there would show that there would be no need for it, right? So you're trying to disprove that, okay? However, what Gunn and David Zaslav didn't take into account is that Gunn's Superman alienated about half of Zack Snyder's audiences that loved his movies and vision, right? The same people that he thought that he could just reboot them into believing that this movie, they'll just forget the 10-year investment that they had in the Snyderverse, and they'll just dramatically turn over and just accept whatever you put in front of them. Okay, okay. So the people that love Man of Steel accounted for 52 to 60% of its audiences, and Batman versus Superman accounted for 47% of its audiences. Okay. And as you can see, a lot less people showed up to see Gunn's Superman reboot. Audiences that supported Man of Steel are down from 40% to 48%. Batman vs. Superman Dawn of Justice are down from 55% to 60%. And as the article suggests, that Gunn's Superman could never compete against Man of Steel, as it brought in nearly $1 billion. And Batman vs. Superman Dawn of Justice brought in $1.175 billion. So that's when you include adjustment for inflation. Even when you don't, it still doesn't catch up to Man of Steel's over $660 million, and Batman vs. Superman Dawn of Justice $874 million. Okay? So, I mean, again, it's extremely clear that 12 years later, Gunn's Superman doesn't even compare in terms of box office numbers, tickets sold, how many people supported it, because it shows Man of Steel brought in more than $402 million domestically when you include adjustment for inflation. So, another issue I wanted to take into account here, because I did mention the budgeting that I was going to cover. According to Gunn, when someone asked him if the Superman movie needed to make $650 million, right? Because I said 850 to $900 million, right? Because that would be the real number that you would have to beat Man of Steel to be able to justify why you decide to reboot everything, right? So when somebody asked him, does the Superman movie need to make $655 million to break even, right? In order for it to be a success, his response was, "That's absolutely false. Anybody that believes that doesn't understand the film business, and they would have to be idiots to make the first film within a franchise that has to make that much." Okay, well, let's keep this on record, okay? Because there's a reason why I'm putting all this together, because I want to keep receipts. So he said it, not me. So let's hold on to that. So in my previous slide, I brought up that Gunn's Superman needed to make at least $850 to $900 million based on the budget and the marketing. So let's get into it. First, what I'm going to do is I'm going to break down why this movie is an absolute and complete flop. For one, Gunn's Superman is ranked number 5 out of all the Superman movies based on current box office numbers and gross adjusted for inflation numbers, which puts it at the bottom 3 worst Superman movies ever made. Secondly, if you see the budget and expenses, Gunn's Superman movie is in the hole and won't be able to see a profit, which could cause Warner Brothers to lose more money. If we believe that only $225 million was only spent on the budget, and I'm not an accountant, but I've heard other people say that Warner Brothers could lose up to $50 million or more at this point. And lastly, according to Warner Brothers, whenever a title goes to digital release less than 36 days after its release, in this case 34 days, it's considered either a bomb or a flop. Considering Gunn's Superman went to digital after 34 days, despite Gunn's excuse for people that couldn't make it to the movie theaters for whatever reason, and because he didn't know his own show's release date. He tried to cover up the fact that this film is a flop, along with Furiosa, a Mad Max saga, Joker, Folie Deux, Shazam, Fury of the Gods, and Lord of the Rings, the animated movie. All direction points towards it being a flop. Okay? So, let's also break this down. And also, to reiterate my point of it being a flop, let's get back to breaking it even. Let's get back to for it to break even. So, if Black Adam, which is considered a flop, that only made $393 million at the box office, which only cost $195 million along with $100 million for the marketing needed for $600 million. They needed $600 million to break even, right? So why is it that Gunn Superman, which cost $225 million along with another $125 for marketing, only needed to make $500 million to break even? So why does a movie that costs less need to make more than the movie that costs more only needs to make less? Somebody please try to make that make sense to me. Again, you would have to be an idiot to do this. But he said it, not me. Again, I'm going to hold him to his word. I'm going to hold him to what he said. And if I take James Gunn at his word, which I don't, the official number for the budget cost is estimated at $225 million, right? That's the official number. That's the number he's been floating, right? Excuse me. However, according to the Ohio Motion Picture Tax Credit Program, it shows Warner Brothers actually spent $363 million for Gunn's Superman movie, right? Which they received an $11 million tax credit from the state of Ohio. So the question is, who do I believe more? Who has an incentive to lie? The Ohio Motion Picture Tax Credit Program has no reason to lie because it's official in a matter of record. But on the other hand, James Gunn has a history of doing nothing but lying, contradicting himself repeatedly, and has lost all and absolute credibility. So I'll go with the state of Ohio, respectfully, which shows Gunn and Zaslav may be deeper in the hole than they like to admit to, and that explains why they have to lie. And I just want to take this opportunity to say to all the Gunn fans, critics, and shills and media outlets, before this movie came out, you guys went out of your way to say that Gunn's Superman movie was going to make $1 billion before it was even released, okay? Even before the leaks, or even after the leaks came out, and even after the test screening shows that it was failing, you actually tried to go to say, oh, it was going to make $1 billion. Then you went from there to $700 to $900 million. Then you went to it's going to make $640 to $690 million, and to where now it only needs to make $500 million to break even, and now only the domestic box office counts. The level of goalpost moving show only shows that you guys were desperate for a win because you really didn't know. You really, to be honest with you, you guys really did see the loss coming. You just didn't want to accept it or believe it. So that's why you were trying to rationalize any type of money that it was going to make, because you guys saw it was going to lose anyway. So there's a certain level of cope here that we need to address here. That's probably the base of Gunn's audiences. Okay, so for some reason, as I started off before, Gunn's Superman movie is still labeled a success, even though it has failed on every single metric. To all movies, it has failed on every single metric. To all movies are held to the same standard to determine the level of success, right? But for some reason, Gunn's Superman movie gets a pass. Here you see that all the media outlet shills, celebrity shills, critic shills have said it to be the best comic book movie of all time, the best movie of the year, the best Superman movie ever made. However, nobody takes into account that Warner Brothers has a 25% stake in Rotten Tomatoes, and that completely gets left out of the conversation for some reason. And I find it ironic that the score of Gunn's Superman is in the same range of the two of the Christopher Reeves Superman movies, due to the same criticism that Gunn fans and critics had about Man of Steel. That Gunn's Superman was similar or resonated to the Christopher Reeves fans and tones of the Superman movies. And it just goes to show the level of what they're willing to stretch to pretend that this is the real reason why they liked it. The point is, the propaganda machine went into full overdrive with this movie. Other than the final box office, Man of Steel beating Gunn's Superman 12 years later is another win that I get out of all of this. That Gunn's Superman triggered a lot of the Man of Steel viewership, the Man of Steel fans, or people who want to be Man of Steel fans. It made the viewership go up. It made it a streaming hit. And I think people went to go see it to either reminisce or to see how Gunn's version came up short, and to see what could have been had it been left alone to give it the sequels it deserved. Okay? And I want you guys to understand something. And I want you to take this, I want you to fully comprehend this. So, Empire Magazine has a tradition of putting Superman actors on the covers that dates back to 1978 with the late Christopher Reeves, to 2006's Brandon Routh, and 2013 with Henry Cavill. Do you know who didn't get offered the cover? That's right, David Cornsweet. I don't know why they didn't offer him the cover and why they didn't use his portrayal, but for some reason, there's something about his portrayal of Superman, or his image or likeness of his Superman, that they just chose not to be associated with for some reason. And whatever reservations that they have, they felt strongly enough to break tradition to not offer Gunn Superman the cover of the Empire magazine. So that's just something to take into account. And lastly, I will close with this. If Warner Brothers, David Zaslav, and James Gunn had just played fairly and allowed Zack Snyder to finish out his vision without studio interference, internal politics, corporate greed, Zack Snyder could have kept you making millions and billions of dollars. Instead, you guys will be bleeding profits trying to go with cheap budgets and cheap talent. And you're getting what you asked for because you guys are paying for it, literally paying for it. Because you guys thought that you could keep rebooting the audience to make them forget about the 10-year investment that they had in the Snyderverse. And you felt that you didn't have to cater to his audiences and recognize the legacy that he left. The truth is, this was over before it started. Overall, Gunn's flop proves two things. Superman didn't have to be rebooted, and it didn't measure up to Man of Steel, nor could it ever. And the DCEU never needed to be rebooted at all. Which means Gunn and Zaslav don't have a DCEU if you have no fans to support it. Wallets closed. But that's all I have so far. Check back with me for more updates on the DC Universe, Marvel Universe, and other movie universes. Until the next video, peace.